They rest deep beneath layers of volcanic ash dating back to 536 BC, mass graves, entire settlements entombed not by war or plague, but by starvation during the years when summer never came. Their bodies lie twisted in the final agonies of hunger, skeletal hands clutching rusted tools and empty grain stores, as if they died waiting for a spring that never arrived. These are not merely victims of nature's cruelty. They are grim witnesses to what their descendants would remember as Fimbulwinter, the mighty winter that heralds the end of everything. This is the story of Ragnarok, the Norse apocalypse that doesn't simply destroy the world, but reveals the terrible truth that endings and beginnings are the same cosmic breath, separated only by the thickness of mortality's veil. In Norse mythology, Ragnarok is a foretold series of impending events, including a great battle in which numerous great Norse mythological figures will perish, including the gods Odin, Thor, Tyr, Freyr, Heimdall, and Loki. It will entail a catastrophic series of natural disasters, including the burning of the world, and culminate in the submersion of the world underwater. Yet this clinical description fails to capture the sheer cosmic horror of what the ancient Scandinavians envisioned, a universe-spanning catastrophe that would make modern apocalyptic fiction seem quaint by comparison. The word itself carries multiple meanings: fate of the gods, or twilight of the gods, but the later form Ragnarok translates more ominously as darkness of the gods. This is not merely the end of the world, but the extinguishing of the very lights that hold chaos at bay. The Norse understood something that modern civilization has forgotten: that even gods can die, and when they do, they take their entire reality with them into the abyss. The theological implications of divine mortality set Norse mythology apart from other religious traditions that promise eternal, unchanging deities. In the Norse worldview, the gods are not omnipotent beings existing outside of time and causality, but rather powerful entities trapped within the same cosmic cycles that govern mortal existence. They age, they bleed, they fear, and ultimately, they die. This radical theological position reflects a profound understanding of universal impermanence that would later find expression in Buddhist philosophy, but with a distinctly Northern European fatalism that embraces destruction as not merely inevitable, but necessary. The gods of Asgard know their doom is prophesied, yet they continue to fight against it, not because they believe they can win, but because the struggle itself defines their divine nature. They are gods precisely because they choose to battle hopelessness with full knowledge of their defeat, an existential heroism that transforms cosmic pessimism into a form of transcendent courage. The prophecy begins not with war or fire, but with winter, Fimbulwinter. 3 consecutive years of snow and ice without a single summer's reprieve. Fimbulwinter is 3 successive winters, when snow comes in from all directions, without any intervening summer. But this is no ordinary winter. It is winter as cosmic force. Winter as the universe's death rattle. Winter that devours not just warmth, but hope itself. The snow doesn't merely fall. It attacks from every direction simultaneously, as if the very concept of shelter has been erased from reality. Trees freeze and shatter like glass, their death screams echoing across barren landscapes where even the wolves have succumbed to the cold. Crops rot in fields turned to permafrost. Cattle die standing upright and are preserved as monuments to abundance's end. And humans huddle in their halls watching their breath freeze before it leaves their lips. This is winter as weapon, winter as judge and executioner, winter that transforms the world into a crystalline tomb, where only the frozen wind speaks the names of the dead. The psychological impact of perpetual winter on human consciousness cannot be overstated. Seasonal affective disorder, a modern medical condition affecting millions in northern latitudes, provides a glimpse into the mental devastation that would accompany 3 years without summer. But Fimbulwinter represents something far more catastrophic than seasonal depression. It is the complete severance of humanity's relationship with the natural cycles that regulate not just agriculture, but the fundamental rhythms of consciousness itself. Sleep patterns dissolve when day and night lose their meaning under perpetual cloud cover. Reproductive cycles collapse when the body's hormonal responses to seasonal light changes are disrupted. Social structures crumble when the promise of spring renewal, the psychological foundation of hope, is revealed to be a lie. The survivors of Fimbulwinter would emerge psychologically transformed, their minds reshaped by an experience of cosmic abandonment that would forever alter their species' relationship with the divine order. Modern climate scientists have discovered that the most notable event linked to Fimbulveter is the volcanic winter of 536 AD, which brought about a significant drop in temperatures across northern Europe, caused by massive volcanic eruptions that sent ash clouds into the atmosphere, blocking the sun for years. Scientific analysis reveals that in that year, one or more volcanic eruptions in the northern hemisphere triggered a 10-year volcanic winter. The Norse who survived this catastrophe would have witnessed their world transformed into something alien and hostile. Summers that never warmed above freezing, harvests that never came, children born into a world where the sun was nothing more than a pale disk behind perpetual ash clouds. These people, traumatized by environmental collapse beyond their comprehension, would have interpreted the disaster through the only lens available to them: mythology. The volcanic winter became Fimbulwinter, the climate catastrophe became divine judgment, and the mass starvation that followed became the prelude to the gods' own death. In their telling and retelling of this trauma, they created not just a myth, but a prophecy of universal ending that still haunts our collective unconscious centuries later. The political and economic dimensions of Fimbulwinter reveal how environmental catastrophe becomes social catastrophe with terrifying efficiency. Archaeological evidence from Scandinavian settlements during this period shows the complete breakdown of trade networks that had sustained northern European civilization for centuries. Hoards of silver and gold buried during this time reflect desperate attempts to preserve wealth in a world where wealth had lost all meaning. Precious metals cannot be eaten, and their intrinsic value vanishes when survival becomes the only currency. The elaborate social hierarchies that defined medieval Scandinavian society collapsed almost overnight, as jarls and thralls alike faced the same fundamental challenge of finding food in a landscape that had ceased to produce it. This democratic quality of environmental destruction, its indifference to human social distinctions, appears throughout the Ragnarok narrative, suggesting that the Norse recognized climate catastrophe as the great equalizer that renders all human pretensions meaningless in the face of cosmic indifference. As Fimbulwinter tightens its grip on the world, the social order begins to collapse in ways that make modern disaster films seem optimistic. Brother turns against brother, children abandon their parents, and the bonds of kinship dissolve like ice in acid rain. This is not mere societal breakdown, but the fundamental corruption of human nature itself, as if the cold has frozen not just the landscape, but the capacity for love, loyalty, and compassion. The halls of kings echo empty, their golden treasures worthless in a world where bread has become more precious than gold, where survival trumps honor, where the strong prey upon the weak without shame or consequence. Even the gods begin to abandon their posts, retreating to Asgard as the prayers of dying mortals fall on divine ears that have grown deaf to suffering. The wolves Skirl and Hati, who have chased the sun and moon across the sky since time began, finally catch their prey and devour them, plunging the world into a darkness so complete that it has weight, pressing down upon the earth like a burial shroud woven from despair itself. The symbolic significance of Skirl and Hati's final triumph cannot be overlooked. These are not merely cosmic predators, but representations of time itself finally consuming the celestial bodies that have marked humanity's relationship with temporality since consciousness began. When the wolves devour the sun and moon, they are not just extinguishing light, but destroying the very concept of measured time, the rhythmic alternation of day and night that has structured human experience since the species emerged. The resulting darkness is not simply the absence of illumination, but the absence of temporal organization, a return to the primordial chaos that existed before creation imposed order upon the void. In this darkness, past and future collapse into an eternal present of suffering, and the linear progression of cause and effect that underlies rational thought dissolves into meaningless simultaneity. Neil Gaiman captures this inevitable doom perfectly. I learned the Norse gods came with their own doomsday, Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, the end of it all. The gods were going to battle the frost giants, and they were all going to die. This is not a story about heroes triumphing over evil, but about the terrible democracy of death that claims gods and mortals with equal indifference. When the final battle comes, it unfolds on Vigrid, a plain so vast it stretches beyond the horizon in all directions, large enough to accommodate all the armies of existence in their last desperate struggle. Odin the All-Father, wielder of wisdom and war, falls to the jaws of Fenrir the wolf, his ravens Hugin and Munin circling overhead like black omens witnessing their master's doom. Thor, thunder god and champion of mankind, trades his life for that of Jörmungandr, the world serpent, both dying in pools of poison that steam and hiss against the frozen ground. Freya, god of fertility and abundance, dies weaponless because he once traded his sword for love, a poetic irony that underscores how even divine passion becomes complicit in universal destruction. The choreography of these final deaths reveals the Norse understanding of how individual choices, however noble or necessary, contribute to cosmic catastrophe through unintended consequences. Freya's decision to trade his sword for love, a choice that speaks to the highest human values, directly enables his death and, by extension, the destruction of the world he was meant to protect. This tragic irony runs throughout the Ragnarok narrative, suggesting that the end of the world results not from evil triumphing over good, but from the internal contradictions within goodness itself. The gods die not because they are wicked, but because they are flawed in recognizably human ways, proud, passionate, loyal to their own detriment. Their destruction becomes inevitable precisely because they possess the virtues that make them worthy of worship, revealing a universe where moral excellence and cosmic survival are fundamentally incompatible. The battle's crescendo is not victory but mutual annihilation, as gods and giants destroy each other with such thoroughness that the very battlefield becomes a funeral pyre. Surtur, the fire giant whose flaming sword was forged before the first dawn, strides across the corpse-strewn plain and sets the world tree Yggdrasil ablaze. The cosmic ash tree that connects all 9 realms burns like a torch the size of galaxies, its branches, which once held up the heavens, crashing down in showers of sparks that ignite the remnants of civilization. Forests become infernos, mountains melt like candle wax, and the oceans boil away in clouds of steam that rise to heaven only to fall back as tears of the sky itself weeping for what has been lost. Even the very fabric of reality begins to unravel, as the laws of physics themselves seem to acknowledge defeat in the face of such cosmic catastrophe. This is not mere planetary destruction, but the dissolution of existence itself, as if the universe has decided that consciousness was a mistake and unconsciousness the only honest state. Surtur's role as the agent of final destruction carries particular significance in the Norse cosmological system. Unlike the chaotic forces of destruction found in other mythologies, Surtur represents destruction as a necessary cosmic function, the universal principle that clears away the accumulated debris of failed creation to make space for new beginning. His flame is not malevolent but surgical, burning away not just the physical world, but the conceptual structures that have grown corrupt through age and repetition. The burning of Yggdrasil, the world tree that connects all realms of existence, symbolizes the destruction of the very framework through which consciousness organizes reality. When the cosmic tree burns, it takes with it not just the physical connections between worlds, but the mental categories through which beings understand their place in the cosmic order. The fire that consumes everything becomes a form of radical cleansing that purges the universe of its accumulated contradictions and impossibilities. Yet in the midst of this universal holocaust, something extraordinary happens that sets Norse mythology apart from other traditions of apocalyptic literature. According to Vafthrudnir, only two human beings, Lif and Lifprasir, will survive Ragnarok. While chaos engulfed the world, Lif and Lifprasir will hide in the forest and survive the long winters of Fimbulvetur. These two survivors, whose names mean simply life and life-eager, represent more than mere human endurance. They embody the universe's stubborn refusal to accept non-existence as final. Hidden in the sacred grove of Hodmimis Holt, they sustain themselves on morning dew while the world burns around them. Their survival a quiet act of rebellion against the tyranny of ending. They are not heroes in any conventional sense, possessing no magical weapons or divine protection, but rather the most ordinary of miracles. Life clinging to existence through sheer biological determination when everything else has surrendered to death. The survival of Lif and Lifprasir introduces a profoundly different understanding of heroism than what dominates most mythological traditions. These are not warriors who achieve glory through combat, not kings who preserve their people through political wisdom, not magicians who manipulate supernatural forces to overcome impossible odds. They are survivors whose greatest achievement is the passive acceptance of continued existence when existence itself has become unbearable. Their heroism lies not in action, but in endurance. Not in triumph, but in persistence. Not in changing the world, but in outlasting its destruction. This represents a distinctly feminine form of heroism that contrasts sharply with the masculine heroism of the dying gods, where Odin and Thor achieve immortality through glorious death. Lif and Lifprasir achieve immortality through inglorious survival. Their names, stripped of all pretension to individual identity, mark them as archetypal representatives of life's essential nature. The blind, stubborn, irrational refusal to cease existing, even when existence offers nothing but suffering. As the fires die and the waters recede, a new earth emerges from the ashes of the old, green and fertile beyond anything the previous world had known. The few surviving gods, Balder and Höder, returned from the dead, Vidar and Vali, who witnessed their fathers' deaths, Thor's sons Modi and Magni carrying their father's hammer. Gather at Idavol, the plain where Asgard once stood. They sit among the ruins of their former glory and play with golden pieces, the same game tokens their predecessors once used, as if continuity could be maintained through ritual repetition of forgotten pleasures. But these are not the same gods who perished in the final battle. They are shadows made flesh, echoes of divine power trying to remember how to be eternal in a universe that has proven eternity to be just another word for a very long time. The new pantheon will rule over a transformed cosmos, but one cannot escape the feeling that they are playing roles written by their predecessors, trapped in cosmic cycles they don't fully understand. The description of this post-apocalyptic divine council reveals the Norse understanding of how trauma shapes consciousness across generational boundaries. The surviving gods are not fresh starts, but inherited legacies, carrying within their resurrected bodies the cellular memory of cosmic destruction. Their game playing among the ruins suggests both continuity and profound alienation. They perform the rituals of their predecessors while inhabiting a fundamentally transformed reality that renders those rituals simultaneously meaningful and meaningless. The golden pieces they manipulate may be the same objects used by the previous generation of gods, but their significance has been altered by the intervening catastrophe in ways that cannot be undone through mere repetition. This scene captures the psychological state of trauma survivors, who must rebuild their lives using the fragments of destroyed meaning systems, never quite certain whether they are restoring the past or creating something entirely new from its remains. This cyclical nature of Norse cosmology reveals perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Ragnarok: the implication that it has happened before and will happen again. Time itself is presented between cyclic and linear, and some scholars have argued that cyclic time was the original format for the mythology. The universe is not a story with a beginning, middle, and end, but a wheel that turns through eternal revolutions of creation, flourishing, corruption, destruction, and rebirth. Each cycle may last millions of years, but from the perspective of cosmic time, they are merely heartbeats in an infinite rhythm of death and resurrection. The gods who died at Ragnarok may have been echoes of gods who died in previous apocalypses, just as the new gods who replace them will someday fall to their own Ragnarok when the wheel turns full circle once more. This suggests a universe that is not just mortal, but compulsively suicidal, addicted to its own destruction, in ways that make human self-destructiveness seem quaint by comparison. The philosophical implications of cyclical apocalypse challenge fundamental assumptions about progress, meaning, and the nature of existence itself. If every achievement is destined to be destroyed and replaced by identical achievements in the next cosmic cycle, what significance can any individual action possess? If the gods themselves are trapped in repetitive patterns of death and resurrection, what hope can mortals have of transcending their own limitations? Yet the Norse response to these questions reflects a profound existential maturity. They embrace the cyclical nature of existence not as a source of despair, but as a liberation from the burden of ultimate significance. Since everything will be destroyed and recreated, the only rational response is to live fully within the present cycle, to embrace one's role in the cosmic drama without demanding that the drama have permanent meaning beyond its own performance. The influence of Ragnarok on modern culture reveals our deep psychological need for stories that acknowledge the reality of endings while promising the possibility of new beginnings. From Wagner's Ring Cycle to Marvel's Thor movies, from climate change discourse to nuclear war anxieties, the imagery and themes of Norse apocalypse continue to resonate with contemporary audiences who sense that their own civilization may be approaching its own Fimbulwinter. We see it in rising sea levels that echo the waters engulfing Midgard, in extreme weather patterns that mirror the chaos preceding the final battle, in social divisions that recall the breakdown of kinship bonds during the mighty winter. Perhaps our fascination with Ragnarok stems from recognition that we are living through our own version of these mythic events, that the Norse prophecy was not about one specific ending, but about the eternal pattern of how worlds die. Gradually, then suddenly, then gradually again in endless repetition. The archaeological evidence from 536 AD provides a chilling reminder that apocalyptic myths often arise from apocalyptic realities, that the imagination's darkest flights may be grounded in historical trauma too devastating to process except through the protective lens of supernatural narrative. Those mass graves in Denmark speak to real people who lived through their own version of Fimbulwinter, who watched their world transform into something alien and hostile, who died clutching tools that had become useless in a landscape where familiar rules no longer applied. Their bones rest beneath volcanic ash, like a layer of cosmic sorrow. Testament to the fact that sometimes myths don't predict the future so much as they preserve memories of pasts too terrible to remember directly. The Norse who created the Ragnarok narrative were not prophets but survivors, not visionaries but witnesses, not creators of fantasy, but chroniclers of lived nightmare transformed into story as a way of making sense of the senseless. Standing today in the places where these ancient peoples once struggled against the dying of the light, the fjords of Norway, the forests of Sweden, the windswept islands of Denmark, one can still feel the weight of that cosmic winter pressing down through the centuries. The landscape itself seems to remember, as if stones and trees and wind carry cellular memories of years when summer never came, when the gods proved mortal, when the world ended not with a bang but with the slow accumulation of frozen tears. Modern climate scientists warn of tipping points and feedback loops that echo the inexorable progression toward Fimbulwinter, while politicians and philosophers debate whether human civilization has the wisdom to avoid its own prophesied destruction. Perhaps the most terrifying aspect of Ragnarok is not that it describes the end of the world, but that it describes the end of worlds, suggesting that destruction and renewal are not historical events, but fundamental properties of existence itself.